Hi there, welcome to another video from Hegarty Maths. It's Mr. Hegarty here, and in this video we're talking about census, samples and bias. So let's start with the data handling cycle, something I need you familiar with. Can you remember the 4 steps for this, or the 4 stages? Well, you plan, you collect data, you present the data, and then you analyze the data. Now, in this particular video, we're focusing on collecting the data and talking about what a census and a sample are, and also how when we collect the data to make sure it's fair data and not biased. So that's what we're going to be talking about. So firstly, with the population, let's talk about what a population is and define it. The population is an entire group of people or things you want to conduct your investigation on, and that's what a population is. Now, this is a key word. A census is when you ask every member of that entire population or collect data in regards to every member of that population. That's called a census. And in the UK, sometimes the government conducts a census where they ask every single person in the UK information about where they live and their names and their ages, etc. That's a census. Now, the key thing about a census is it is representative and unbiased, and it should be accurate. There is no bias because you ask everyone in the population, so the results you get would reflect the whole population. Now, a sample is something you do. It's a smaller group within that population that you conduct your investigation on. It may not be possible for me to ask every boy and girl in the UK if they like maths or not, so maybe I might ask 100 and use that information to make some judgment about the whole population. But there's 2 key things about a sample you must always remember. The first, your sample, you must try to make it as representative, as unbiased as you can, and we're going to talk later about ways to do that. So you must give it your best shot to try and make it fair and represent the population. And secondly, the larger your sample size, the more accurate your results should be. And typically, if your sample size is like 10% of the population, it's considered decent. So say if your population was a school of 2,000 students, if you sampled 200, which is 10% of that, it's a decent sample size. Now, what are the positive and negatives? Well, let's think about the positives. The positives are sample is much quicker than the population. You don't have to ask everyone, and it therefore is cheaper. The negatives are it may be unrepresentative or biased. If you don't ask enough people or ask the wrong people, you may get a biased result, and it may be inaccurate. Okay, so you have to know about the keywords a population, you have to know what a census is, you have to know what a sample is. This is crucial here. You must know the 2 things you must focus on with your sample. You must try to make it representative and unbiased, and you must make it as large as you can, and also you need to know the positives and the negatives about them. Anyway, having talked about a population, a sample, representative and bias, etc., let's go on and do some questions. Pause the video and have a go here. So Colin wants to investigate who's doing better out of girls and boys in his GCSE maths class at school. What's the population? Well, we've done this one before. It's the students in his GCSE maths class. Assuming that's 30 or 50 or something, that's a reasonable number. So is Colin likely to use a census or sample in this case? Explain your answer. Well, he would likely use a census for the class here because the class size is likely to be small. Class. Okay, and we're done. Next one. Pause the video, have a go. Well, Brian wants to investigate who's doing better out of girls and boys in the whole of the UK. So the population are the students in the UK, the boys and girls. So in this case, is he likely to use a census or a sample? Well, actually, he might be able to use either or. A census, he might be able to get a census because the data might exist when the league tables are published and the government produce their report. So he may be able to produce a census if data available, you could say, or a sample if not. It depends on whether the information is available or not. Usually you could get the information about the GCSE results of every student in the UK, so you might be able to use a census. Next one, pause the video, have a go. So Sarah wants to find out the average pocket money that students in the Year 7 class receive from their parents. The population here is her Year 7 class. Is she likely to use a census or a sample? A census here. She should be able to easily ask her Year 7 class. The numbers are bound to be lower than 50. Next one, pause, have a go. So she wants to find out this time, Sarah, about how much pocket money students receive from their parents in the UK. So this time it's the population is maybe students in the UK. And this time, a census or a sample, I very much doubt there is information out there for every single parent and how much pocket money they give their student. So in this case, you're bound to have to use a sample, all right, and do some investigation yourself. Maybe ask 100 or 1,000 people and see if you can work out information based on that. Next question, pause the video, have a go. So here are two methods used by a teacher to find out whether the students in a primary school of 200 pupils like the desserts available. Which one is more likely to be biased? Alright, so biased means doesn't represent the population. So we should write that down. Doesn't reflect the population, let's say. So here are the two methods available. Which one would more likely give bias? Option 1. The teacher stands by the dessert queue and asks the first 50 students who get a dessert their opinions on the desserts the school gives. Or secondly, the teacher writes all 200 students' names on individual pieces of paper and then places those names in a hat. The teacher picks 50 students at random and interviews those students. Which is more biased? Well, I would say that option 1 is more biased. And the reason is the students are getting desserts. Okay, so that might mean they like the desserts. What about the students who aren't in the dessert queue and maybe don't get desserts because they don't like them? Maybe you're not asking all the students you should. So more biased, and you could say as students in queue may be more likely to like desserts. And you must get this word in. Therefore, not representative. You must say that when you get asked these questions, not representative. Now the next one, it's at random. She asks 50 students by picking their names out of a hat at random. This one seems better. Now one key thing here, do note, in both cases they asked 50 students. Okay, and remember I said for a good sample it needs to be 10%. 10% of 200 is 20. So she's asked 50, that's a decent number. So in that sense her sample's decent. The problem with it was the option 1, standing in the queue, is likely to be not representative. Okay, next one. Pause the video, have a think. Okay, very same scenario. There are two options in which she asks the students. The first one, she writes their names on individual pieces of paper and picks 50 students at random. So here she picks 50 students. And in option 2, she does the exact same thing, but she picks 7 students. Which one is more likely to be unreliable? Well, remember, for a reliable sample, you need 10% of the population. So 10% of 200, we said, is 20. In this case, she has picked 50 students, so it's likely to be accurate. In this case, however, she's only picked 7 students, so it's likely to be inaccurate. So which one's likely to be unreliable? I would say option 2 is unreliable, as the sample size is small. Okay? Next one, pause the video, have a go. So Henry wants to find out how long people spend a week exercising in the UK. The population here is people in the UK. Is Henry likely to use a census or a sample? It's unlikely that that information exists in the census, and Henry's not going to want to go out and do a census for every single person in the UK, so his only option would be to do a sample. And then we're told Henry decides to stand outside the gym and ask the first 20 people he sees coming out of the gym how long each week they spend exercising. What, if anything, is wrong with this? Let me give you a hint that there are actually two things wrong. Have a think. The first is he is asking 20 people out of the entire population of the UK. That is an absolutely rubbish sample. So the sample is too small. Secondly, he's standing outside a gym, so obviously it's going to be biased because the people outside the gym are more likely to go than those sitting maybe at home who aren't going to the gym. So it's likely to be unrepresentative. And you could say why, as people outside gym are more likely to spend longer there. Okay, and we're done. Last question, pause, have a go. So Carolyn wants to find the average height of the 800 students in her school. State the population, 800 students in school. Is she likely to use a census or a sample? To measure all 800, to be honest, would be a bit of a pain. So maybe a sample, maybe a census. Let's say sample as easier and quicker. And Caroline decides to measure the heights of all the 8 students in her female art class. What, if anything, is wrong? Two things wrong. First thing is, for 10% of 800 would be 80 in the sample as a decent sample. She's only got 8, so sample size too small. And she only asked females. What about the males? So it's unrepresentative as all females. And that's it for this video. Thanks loads for watching.